He's Howard Eibach, a former copywriter and creative director and the author of 2 books on the creative brief.
And he's Henry Gomez, an ad agency strategist with 29 years of experience. Together, Henry and I are the Brief Brothers. We love talking about advertising, creative briefs, and briefing. Henry, we're back with another episode, and I guess we'll call this a kind of nuts and bolts episode because I wanted to address a topic that I hear almost every time I do a training, whether it's with A&A or my own clients on writing creative briefs. And the question comes to me, what's the difference between a creative brief for a B2C client and a B2B client? It's like, what do I have to do to make a really good brief for B2B? And my answer is nothing. It's a creative brief. It's not a business to business creative brief. It's not a television creative brief. It's a brief. And I thought it would be a great topic to discuss because I want to dispel this myth that for some reason, when you have a B2B client, and lots of agencies do, and I've worked on plenty of them myself, and so have you, there's some bone in your head that you either have to put in or take out to write a brief for business. Something. So let's take a moment here. Let's take an episode and discuss this because I think it's important to get the point across that you don't need to change your thinking. You don't need to change anything.
I think it's timely coming off of last week's episode where we talked about the GoDaddy case study that won the Grand Prix at Cannes in the B2B category. And though I gave them kudos for entering in B2B, and it is technically a B2B entry, the strategist and the work, you could tell. I don't think he's a B2B strategist. He's a strategist, right?
Right, exactly.
The same way the brief is a brief. And so you and I talked about it a little bit before we went on, and the way I see it is the standard brief that you might use, the template that you're using for your B2C clients, with the standard 6 or 7 questions that we're all accustomed to: target audience, objective, single-minded proposition, reasons to believe. The questions remain the same. What's going to be different is the nature of the answers, right? Like if you're trying to reach a housewife who's in the grocery aisle, like that's a qualitatively different thing than the procurement manager at a major corporation, an IT guy who's responsible for buying stuff. And so you need to get into that world. You need to do the steps that you would do for a consumer for that target, right? Like, what is he looking for? What does he want out of this transaction?
Right.
What is he afraid of? Like, he's afraid of, spending $1 million on equipment that doesn't work, right? Or that isn't compatible with the other equipment that they already have, right?
Yeah.
So those are the types of things that you need to, as a brief writer, right, or strategist, have to dig into the research and do the homework, but only in the context of this person as the buyer rather than the buyer for themselves or for a family.
The thing that I find interesting is the fact that when people are writing this brief for business to business, they easily forget that the person that they're talking to is still a human being.
Absolutely.
That has wants and desires, aspirations, wants to impress his or her boss,
doesn't want to get fired, wants to get a promotion, wants to get a pat on the shoulder.
All the same things that
save the day and save millions of dollars.
Yeah. So, there might be some very technical things about the products or the services that procurement person is trying to do, but the bottom line is, and this is true, this is what Bill Bernbach says, it's got to be about a human reality, something that's truly human. Otherwise, it changes the entire nature of the campaign. And we're not even talking about the creative, we're just talking about how you set up the brief so that the creatives can respond and produce an interesting, compelling, hopefully emotionally resonating piece of communication.
I,
And that's something, we can open the door and talk about, hello, Jersey, and talk about what kind of creative comes from uh, B2B briefs. And
she came to install your ice maker.
yeah, exactly. There's an inside joke. Um, there is a built-in bias, I think, in the B2B world, on the creative side, that it has to be rational. The message, the communication has to be rational, that there's no room for an emotional message. And I think we have plenty of examples out there in the world that have won awards, including this one for GoDaddy, that counter that are put the kibosh on that myth. But I think the most important thing is it's a template, and the template asks certain questions, and those questions require the same kind of thinking, whether it's B2C or B2B. Now, the information, as you said, can change.
I have yet to meet a box on a creative brief that couldn't accommodate product specs for a B2B product. Or
Exactly.
so to me, that box is open, it's empty for a reason. You're supposed to fill it in. And there is an objective, there is a target audience, there
Mhm.
is
A budget.
there is a single-minded proposition or something we need to tell, communicate
Right.
about the product. So there are reasons to believe that thing. So
Mhm.
to me, I've never met a box in a brief that couldn't be re-engineered to accommodate B2B information. The other thing that's interesting, you're talking about rational versus emotional, and I agree. I think there's a tendency to believe that B2B work has to be rational, just like I think there's a tendency to believe that B2C work has to be emotional. I think in most cases it's a blend of both, but you can make arguments that you could certainly sell a product and make an emotional impact with a rational argument, right? And vice versa. My wife works at a B2B agency, and she prior to that she had spent her whole career at B2C agencies, and that's part of what she brings is a little bit of that. Let's think about these people as consumers because they are technically are consumers, right? And so she had one client, I won't say the name, but they had, a bunch of little projects annually, $10,000, $15,000, do a sell sheet, a spec sheet, of this and that, go to the trade show and give out all these handouts and these folders and things. And she gave a more traditional brief to the creatives, and they came up with the idea of a pop-up book that they could take to the trade shows, and they had to print like I don't know how many hundreds of these things. But now the pop-up book had a lot of that technical data and the rational stuff in it, but it had that that tangible, thing that you felt, and it will pop up, and it was, suddenly there was a smile on the audience's face when they're like
And you said
manipulate.
you said it best when you said it triggered a lot of emotions from their childhood, because that's, how often do you see a pop-up book?
And it's easy to remember, and it's something
Yeah,
you want to take home with you and share around the office. Like, look at this thing I got. It was cool, rather than just some sell sheet that you throw in the trash the second
exactly.
you leave the auditorium. So anyway,
Yeah, well, I would say that I want to lump this idea that a creative brief for B2B needs to be different from a creative brief for B2C along in the same pile, where those people who say that there's it's the problem with most briefs is the template itself. So we need to fix our template, or our template is perfect. But that's, you and I both know that the template is simply an empty container and is meaningless until there's
a-
something really good in it.
and across 95% of briefs, they are the same six or seven variables that are phrased differently, the questions slightly
Right.
differently, but getting at the same important questions that we need to have answered in order to effectively create for this assignment.
Really good stuff, Henry.
Good stuff, Howard.
He's Henry Gomez.
And he's Howard Eibach. Together, we're the Brief Brothers. Till next time. Bye bye.